Hey, we're recording live. Hey, I'm Sabrina with Surrender Living. I have Kix Marshall with me today. Hello, Kix.
Hi. I
Hi.
love being on the Sabrina station.
Yeah, good, good. I don't have an intro for you, so please fill us in. Who are you?
You have an intro for me. What kind of channel is this? I think the last time I was on the show, the intro was like a minute and a half long. It was good. We can just probably clip back to that. That was about a year ago, so we'll just slice that back in. My name is Kix Marshall, longtime friend of Sabrina's, full-time listener of the show. Love to be on here. Today we're talking about travel, and that's like my go-to thing. If I had to pick sort of if you're going to pick your identity, and I had to like label myself with somebody, I would label myself as the traveler or an adventurer or something along those lines. So that's sort of the demographic that I fall into and that I feel most comfortable talking about. And if I meet someone and I don't know like much about them or how to segue, I'll just start peppering them with questions to see if they've been anywhere. And then when they fire on a country, and I just like go down their throat about, I'm like, oh, you've been to Australia? I'm like, where have you been? What have you done? Blah blah blah. So that's
Very
like
cool.
my go-to with most people. So every once in a while, I come across somebody who says something like, oh, "I hate travel," and I'm like, "Oh, it sounds like you've never been anywhere." And then
Right?
I'll just sort of throw stories at them and chat a bit. Recently, I've been nowhere because
Good to hear.
yeah, everything's sort of on the fritz at the moment. Most recently, I think we didn't go anywhere in the summertime. Was working, was renovating our house, and then last year over Christmas time, my fiance was in the Deaf Olympics. She's not deaf, but she's an interpreter.
You guys got engaged?
Oh yeah, we got engaged last Christmas, like not on Christmas
Woo.
Day, but I think it was December. I should probably know this. I think it was the 29th or 30th. I think it was the 30th.
Sweet.
Or maybe it was the 31st. Shit, it might have been New Year's Eve. Yeah, in Italy on Juliet's balcony, like the Juliet. It was good. It was pretty good actually.
Yeah,
Uh,
sounds deluxe.
yeah. So she was in Italy at the Deaf Olympics, and I was actually in Portugal, just like messing around. I rented a little scooter and rode around the coast a little bit, and then we met back up in Switzerland, went through Italy, and then yeah, got engaged. That was really fun, and then spent Christmas there. And then for that, my most recent claim to fame was driving from Canada to Argentina on my motorcycle. It took me about 2.5 years. That was sort of my most recent "What have you done lately?" go to.
Right. And we talked about that the last time we got together and jammed. So I'm really happy to have heard about that. And I think right now, Kicks, with all of the racial tension and stuff in the world, it's really cool to hear from travelers because for me, I feel like it's the experience of traveling really helps with all of that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
With the worldview and like it's almost like it's a form of anti-racism
yeah,
being a traveler,
yeah,
right?
100%.
Yeah, yeah. So what would you say? Like how does your worldview differ from someone that's been to all-inclusive Mexican resorts with all the rest of the
Not sure we'd be
Canadian?
friends or they'd like my opinion. I think all inclusives are the devil because it's like a group of people who are paid to like you, and you're meant to treat them like you're an idiot and like they don't know much about your culture. Like that's always feel that's like it might be different. It might if so you interviewed someone who worked there, that might feel differently. Like I got to meet all these people from around the world and it gives me a job or something like that. But I've been to a couple all inclusives, and food's good and the ambiance is nice. But like forcing someone to speak your language for money and then only getting a glimpse of like a very skewed look at what they want you to see of their culture or what the manager wants you to see or whatever the hotel chain wants you to see or whatever it is, and then like being kept in a bus or in a cage or
Yeah,
at arm's length from people, and then be like, oh, they're just like the poor Peruvians who are lucky that we're spending our money there. Or they're just like the Mexican people who just want us to buy hats off them. And I'm like, have you fucking been off the bus? Like,
right.
these people are the same as like your family. They just happen to live like a very different culture.
And
Uh,
it's very manufactured experience, but we're not dogging the industry, like the travel and tourism industry, which is hurting right now. I think it's really important when that does open back up that people really go to those places and patronize those things because places like Mexico, that's their bread and butter, right?
yeah, for sure. And if someone offered me to go on an all inclusive right now, I would go.
Yeah.
That was, they're like, oh, actually, we're going all inclusive, and you can actually travel because we'll fly you right to the all inclusive, and you're not allowed to go in the country or something like that. I'm like, I'll go. Okay, I'm in. Let's do it for sure. But
For
if I had a choice,
sure.
I just feel like they're a bit, I feel like the presentation of a country is a bit skewed when you're in a manufactured setting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So of all of the places you've been in the world, then like what holds your heart? Like what feels most like home away from home?
Ooh, I don't know. That's a tricky one. So there's a couple of parts of the world that I really like and really think are undervalued. So because I just got to drive through all the Americas, that changed my outlook a lot. I'd never been to South America before that, and then I got to spend like a year and a half there, just like extensively seeing all of it. And so the Amazon for me was huge. It was like well, it's huge anyway, but it was like such a thing on my list. I never thought I would get to go. I don't know why. Like there's all these things where you're like, oh, I went here, I went there, but for some reason I just never thought I would go to the Amazon. I've always wanted to, but it's like something sort of out of reach. And then I drove my fucking motorcycle there, and I was like, oh my god. And then so it was my first experience was actually like driving through Ecuador, and like crossing into the Amazon. Actually, like, so I'm writing that
That's
book
incredible.
I was writing last
That's
year.
wow.
I just wrote the chapter on that. And so the sort of kicker is that when I drove into the Amazon rainforest, which is like, you picture like big, huge snakes and dolphins and monkeys and like lush green. And I came in through Ecuador and turned on the gravel road to go into the Amazon, my first ever experience. And pulling out in front of me was this big like tanker truck, and it was like kicking up smoke, and it's kind of blue color. And I'm like, what? So I pulled up beside it, and there was a fucking Schlumberger truck. And on one side of the road was Schlumberger, and the other side was Halliburton, and that's how I was greeted to the Amazon. And I almost died. I almost puked. I was like, I'm
Far
like,
out.
this is the Amazon.
You're
I'm
like,
like,
I'm in Alberta.
yeah, exactly. That's what it was.
Right?
So I was so disappointed, but that was my first experience. However, within a few hours, that sort of washed away, and ended up staying with a local family who like lived in the jungle, and this guy was a teacher at a school, and so it all reversed back to what I was picturing in my head again. But then I got to go through the Amazon in every country it touches except for Colombia. So I went through Peru, through the Amazon, and I went through Brazil, and I went through Bolivia. So it was amazing. So that holds a
And
pretty good part of my heart.
I'm very struck by places with a lot of trees and foliage or whatever, jungle sort of stuff. I'm struck by the scent. Did you like the smell of the Amazon? I know that's a weird question, but
The two things I remember about the smell, sort of that it almost smelled like humid, like if you were
yeah.
to walk into maybe somewhere that was just growing moss in like a greenhouse or something, like that sort of smell. It was all very almost musky but fresh. That's
Cool.
the smell I remember anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting. Very sensory kind of a
Yeah, and
experience.
one other surprising part that I was quite amazed by in the Amazon is that you're picturing like this wild jungle setting, and then maybe when the sun goes down, everything kind of quiets down and hides out. No way. When the sun goes down, it gets like 100 times louder in there, and like the jungle comes to life. Monkeys are screaming, and tigers are howling, and everything's hunting, and you hear rats running
Wow.
around. And I'm just like, who the hell sleeps in the jungle? Because I'm not going to be able to.
Wow. So did you have any close encounters with wildlife?
Yeah,
Or are you
yes
just
and
out
no.
random on your motorcycle?
It was pretty random. So the one night when I was in, I was trekking through, not trekking, like riding my bike through the Amazon in Brazil, headed to Manaus. It's about a 2-day trip. You could do it in one, but it's a bit much to do in one. And so I was just camping in the bush. I just pulled off the road and followed this little side road, and then pulled into the bush just after the sun went down, which isn't very late. Like it's maybe the sun goes down at 6 or something,
Oh
7.
wow.
And then so I pull around a corner, like back in the bush, and make a little spot, and then tuck my bike in. So I'm well off the road, and no one can see me in a way. And like a minute later, not even, I bet you a minute later, a motorbike comes around the corner with this like headlight. I can see it bobbing, and it's an old one. You hear like, and I'm like, what? Oh shit! Someone like saw me. I'm dead. I come in the corner, and I can see the shotgun across this guy's back on both sides, and a leather strap here. And he's ripping around. And he pulls into the bush right beside me and parks his bike and puts his kickstand down. And I'm like, shit, like, what am I going to do? And so instantly, I don't know Portuguese, but I knew enough Spanish where I'm like, oh, if I just speak like really bad Spanish, he'll know I don't speak Portuguese, but we can sort of we can sort of figure each other out. So instantly I come around the corner, and I'm like, hola, ¿cómo estás? He looked at me, and he didn't know I was there. I thought he was coming after me, but he had no idea I was there. He was like, whoa. He was this big, like, maybe not like The Rock, but a pretty big dude, like a big Amazonian dude. no shoes on, just shorts, shotgun across his back, like a little t-shirt, whatever. He looks at me, points at me, and he's like, hey, like whatever, like hola or something. And I'm like, oh shit. So I started talking like Spanish. I'm like, hey, how you doing? Like, what are you doing here? Blah, 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 blah. And he's like looking at me like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, oh, just like I plan on sleeping here. And he came to get my motorbike, a tent, like all in Portuguese, but I kind of got the gist of it. And then, so I asked him about the gun. I'm like, what are you doing? So he's like, I'm going hunting, is what I'm getting. And he drew a picture for me in the sand of like what he was trying to hunt and like the path he was going to go and trying to explain it to me. And so it was really interesting. And I'm like, for half an hour went by, and then he left. He kept saying something about this onsa. I don't know what the hell he was talking about. He left, like an hour goes by, he left by himself. About an hour and a half later, I hear like a bang in the jungle, and then bang right after it. So I'm like, well, this guy didn't have a double-barreled shotgun, and he was by himself. So I'm like, shit, what happened? So I don't want to go to sleep because I'm either like, this guy either like shot someone or they shot back, or for some reason he had two guns, which didn't make sense to me, or like he must have shot an animal close by, which can't be good for me. So I'm like, I'm staying up until this guy comes back. So about 2 hours go by, and the guy comes walking back into where I am. And he's got blood on his hands and blood on his feet, and he's with another guy. And the other guy's got a shotgun too. And the other guy's not as big, but still pretty big. And so I'm like, holy shit. So I'm like, oh, hey. So he comes over and he's explained to me like what they did and where they went and this animal. He's like, the onsa. And I'm like, okay, the onsa. Like, I don't know what the hell's going on. So we talked for like 45 minutes about whatever. I'm not exactly sure. And he leaves. That was it. So I go to sleep that night in the jungle, and it's really loud. I don't really sleep much. I go to Manaus the next day. I'm telling this guy about my experience. I'm like, what's an onsa? He's like, why? Who told you about an onsa? I'm like, this guy I met in the jungle with the shotgun and the blood told me about an onsa. He's like, oh, that's a jaguar. Jaguars. I'm like, motherfucker. He's like, you slept in the jungle last night? I'm like, yeah, for sure. He's like, in what? I'm like, in a tent. He's like, you don't sleep in the jungle in a tent. I'm like, I didn't know that. He's like, the guy's hunting jaguars, like where you're camping. He's probably telling you like not to camp there because there's jaguars there. I'm like, oh. So as far as I'm like, I'm gonna save my life, I don't have any idea. But it was after I found out about it, I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't have camped in the jungle last night.
Maybe. Wowzers.
It was funny, but I never had any like close contacts and stuff. I lived with a guide for like a month too, like right in the Amazon. He was an Amazon rainforest guide.
Oh,
So
yeah.
he took me out and showed me like big boa constrictors and like these turkey vultures and where the dolphins swim and like the pink dolphins that live in the Amazon because they're crazy. And,
oh, do they have pink dolphins there? I thought they only had those in Hong Kong.
nope,
but they have those there.
Yeah. In the
Yeah, I have a little crush on pink dolphins, but I thought they were only in one spot in the world. But that's neat. I'll have to check that out someday.
They're cool. They're weird. They look like a human, like maybe like a little baby, kind of like a pink. It's a bit creepy because they look like a person.
Ooh.
Like a bald pink person. Like they're not like super cute. They're not like you see in a picture like, oh, a pink dolphin, but they're not like,
yeah,
they're like cuter, but they're such a novel thing to see that
yeah. Well, in Hong Kong, I guess they're bubblegum pink. Like they're really kind of bright. So, and I've only seen them in like National Geographic. So yeah.
That's cool. It was neat to see. Yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
So I'll just wrap up that little story really quick, but I'll just say when you ask like the places in the world that I'm sort of most drawn to or have like my heart sort of thing, I'd say Southeast Asia for sure. I love Southeast Asia. It's just such an interesting part of the world.
And tell for those of us that don't know, where's Southeast Asia, like what countries?
That would sort of encompass maybe like Vietnam and Cambodia and Thailand. Thailand's probably the one that most people have maybe been to or would know about. You can maybe blanket Hong Kong in there. I'm not exactly sure if that would classify as Southeast Asia. Maybe Philippines. They have a pretty rich culture, and the food is amazing. And generally, the people are extremely friendly. Like I haven't met a lot of people. Like everyone's not the same, but for the most part, I find that the people from Southeast Asia are quite like friendly and smiley and happy you're there and happy to share their culture and what they do in the world, kind of thing. It's a great part of the planet.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's a good part of the backpack. It's designed for traveling and stuff like that. And then the last one would be, I think, the most underrated country on the planet. And it's tough to say. I feel like it's tough to say to North Americans because they're like, well, I've been there. But I think Mexico is like the most underrated country in the planet. I've been to like 42 countries, and it's like when you actually get to go to Mexico and see the real Mexico, it's so diverse and so like beautiful, and the culture is amazing, and the food is incredible. And the people are so like family oriented and warm and welcoming. And it's so different. Like Canada's huge. So it's kind of like that, where the East Coast and the West Coast would be so different. In Mexico, they have the Indians, like the Tarahumara. I can't remember how you pronounce the name. Anyway, lots of different like native cultures and stuff. And
And
every
the
time I go to Mexico,
ruins
what's that?
and the ruins are incredible. Like
Yeah,
the
the Mayan ruins down in
Whew.
down by Cancun and stuff there, and it's just Mexico's just such a crazy, incredible country. But I find if I tell people that, they're like, "Well, I've been to Mexico," I'm like, "But you haven't been to Mexico. Like you might
Yeah.
have got off a plane in Mexico, but you haven't been to Mexico." So I feel that's just a huge one. It's just like Mexico's such a great place.
Did you eat mole when you were there? Did you
Yeah,
like the chocolate thing?
yeah, I've had mole on like I think I've just had it like on chicken, like baked on chicken, as well as like
Oh, you're making a funny face, Kix. I can tell you don't like it.
it just I find that if I build something when you build something up in your head, it's not what you think it is, because mole isn't like a sweet chocolate dish like you're thinking. It's
No,
dark chocolate, like savory,
it's almost like a gravy.
like
Like,
gravy. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's good. Just I'm thinking like chocolate covered strawberries in my head when I try it, and then it shows up on like chicken baked in a clay pot, and I'm like, what the? But it's no, it was good. It's just wasn't. It was just what I picture in my head versus what showed up on my plate was different. But it was good. Yeah, no, the food's amazing there. It's so amazing.
Yeah. Do you know what I just thought about? We could have planned this better, but of course we can talk again. It would be neat to have some photos. You showing us some of your photos.
Oh yeah,
And
we have lots of
that's
pictures.
actually possible on the Zoomer. So it's quite easy. I would just screen share.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
maybe a little February follow up here with some photos. Like that.
absolutely.
Maybe
Yeah.
we'll-
I think
we'll
it would
set
be
the-
worthwhile to, like, we were talking earlier, finding some more travelers, because I think that's one of the ways to get through the COVIDer for people that are adventurous. It's really, really difficult to sort of stay put.
Yeah.
But being sourced in our memories and sharing our adventures is definitely
That's a
worthwhile.
good idea. Yeah, for sure. Never thought about that. Yeah, like right now on a pretty regular basis, I'll send my fiance. I'm like, well, here's a picture of a 4x4 van I think we should get. We can drive through Africa. And I'm like, oh, by the way, I saw some like tickets to Mexico last night. I found them like $350 return to Florida, Puerto Vallarta for Christmas. I'm like, maybe we go to Puerto Vallarta for Christmas. And I'm like, just so you know, I'm like, I've heard people that are flying into Peru right now. You can go to Peru right now. And she's just like, shut up. Like, we need to go. We need to go somewhere now.
Right.
That's a great idea, actually.
What do they live in Peru? Do they have certain types of homes?
So yeah, I found it varies too where you are, because it has lots of big cities too. So lots of parts are quite modern. But I also stayed with a family for about a month, close to the jungle, like not far off, some place called Villarica. And I sort of ended up there sort of by default. But they lived in like a wooden home made out of like the trees nearby kind of things. It was like fairly modern. But
Yeah.
then I was down kind of by the Rainbow Mountains, and I camped out there in like a field and stuff a couple nights. And the houses nearby were like a mud a mud hut, basically, like not like a little, maybe a step above just like a hut, but it's still like just made out of earth. And you can see where the bathroom is out back, and
Maybe
pretty.
that's what you can do until you can get back to Peru. You can make a little clay hut in your backyard there.
Yeah.
Shaka, like the straw sort of
Mhm.
yurty kind of things they have in Africa. And yeah, we're all gonna have to come up with creative solutions for this.
Yeah. Somebody want to go to Peru? Drop by the house.
Yeah. Stay away from me.
Yeah. 3 soles in the backyard. There you go.
Yeah. So I know you had Claire. Claire was your motorcycle, but I forgot to ask you last time we talked, like, do you have some type of object that you brought home from your travels? Like, what's your favorite thing
I brought Stanley home.
Tell me again who Stanley is?
Stanley was a little monkey that I had taught on the handlebars.
Right.
He's like a little puppet. So he's actually, I can probably see him from here. I can't. He's in my cupboard right now with the glass door, so I can see him there. He does have it's a bit of a rough looking mark because he was held up by a zip tie around the neck for 2.5 years in the sun. So he's still got like a pretty good tan line right here.
But he's not a redneck.
No, he's a brown neck.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so here's my I don't really do souvenir. Like first time I ever went anywhere, like I was like 18, 19, went through like Malaysia and stuff like that, and Australia, and I came back with all like the trinkets from the shops and
Yeah.
blankets and like stamps and stickers and shit. And then I think that was it. I think after that, I'm like, well, I don't really care. I usually, like, now I have like bracelets and shit I'll pick up along the way.
Oh, very cool.
And I don't know, like every once in a while, maybe I'm trying to think, I'll land something that someone gives me. But on the bike trip, it was tricky because not every time I met someone, but on a regular basis, if I met someone for a period of time, like a couple of days or whatever, they would always give me something. Always.
Yeah.
He'd give me like a hat. Like the guy would give me like a hat off his head. He'd give it to me. Like the guy stayed with me in the Amazon. One day he just like literally pulled the shirt off his back. He's like, "Kicks, this look at you." He's like, "This is yours." And I'm like,
Oh,
"No, no, that's good." He's like, "No, no, no, take it." So I had like, fuck, I had just like a bags of stuff. And so when my girlfriend would come visit me, sometimes stuff I thought was like most important, I'd give to her. And I'm like, fuck, like, how do you throw out a gift someone gave you? And I'm like, do I need this hat? Like, do I need this?
right.
Oh, I don't
Right.
know. So I do. I have like those things kicking around, but I don't really collect too
Not too
many.
many mementos. It's all up here. The memories. Yeah.
Yeah, if you see it in my house, it's usually like pretty important. Like if it's there, I'll be like, yeah, that was like I kept that for a reason. So I'll show up. There's
Yeah.
like little things of sand and stuff kicking around.
Right. Yeah, I don't know how else to really stay connected to it at this point besides I think photos are really important, videos are really important, that kind of stuff. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And I don't know, do you keep in touch with many people from your adventures?
Yeah, so it depends a lot who it is, but a lot of people will message me. It's like Facebook's good for that. Like I think Facebook's a little bit of the devil, but at the same time, I love it because
Yeah.
the people that I don't need to keep in contact with people. They can just sort of like if they want to find me, they'll just like hey, or same thing. I'll just like hey, and they'll kind of see what they're up to. I can put a picture up of my motorbike, and all the motorbikers I met are like, oh, I want to go to Canada and ride a motorbike too. Like just because I met them in their own country on their motorbike in Argentina or Colombia, or wherever they were.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so that's pretty good. Even I met a guy in Colombia, and I was riding from here to Argentina, and when I met him, he was like, "Oh my god, like this is what I want to do." Because my whole like life goal was to ride from Colombia to Alaska. I'm like, man, you got to do it. And so they left last
Whoa.
year. They made it to Nicaragua, and the world shut down, and so they spent 3 months there, and then they went home. So he was a little disappointed with that. But I'm like, well, now I know this guy. This guy knows me on his way here. I can help him out. He can stay with us. I know some people sort of along the path or where he's going, that kind of thing. So it's kind of, yeah, so it's handy to keep in touch that way. And then the
Yeah.
Peruvian family that I stayed with for a month, they were basically my family. Like I hadn't been around family in like a year, and I was a little family starved, and I met them and was supposed to stay a night. I stayed a month, and I ended up like had a breakfast at their house, and I help in their little business, and I go fishing with them. And I met like it's just a little village of a
Lovely.
few hundred people. And so the mom sort of messages me like pretty regularly, just like, hey, how are you? What's going on? Or good to
And
see
then
you.
do you have other Canadian traveler friends like that you maybe met here and there or?
Yeah, I met a few bikers that I met. It was a bit weird. I met one guy, actually I was talking to him today. I met one guy in Bolivia on like a fucking red dirt road in the middle of nowhere.
Cool.
Totally out of the blue, like super random. And so I checked, and he had what plate did he have on his bike? Was it Alberta plate?
No way.
And I'm like, where are you from? He's like, oh, I'm from Edmonton. I'm like, shut the hell up. I'm like, what? And so we only talked for like maybe 10 minutes, and then we parted ways. And then when I came back, I ended up meeting him in Edmonton because a guy came to pick up some of my house off Kijiji. And he's like, oh, you're friends with Steve? I'm like, well, kind of. I met him on a trail in Bolivia. And he's like, oh, I'm friends with Steve. I'm like, shut up. So then I Steve, and then I interviewed Steve. I did an interview with him.
Oh, is that Steve's travel?
Yeah, Steve. Yeah, that's him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's just like super random. Like we're not like super buds or anything like that, but it's just like we met there, then we hung out here, and then we'll probably hang out again. And we're from like within 20 kilometers of each other, just weird shit like that.
Yeah. Yeah, neat. For sure. There's a line in this book, Kicks, and it says travelers just like the road just looks up at them and they have to go.
Yeah.
Right. I'm paraphrasing, but I know you understand the sentiment. And yeah, so in a time when we got to stay, it's really nice to be talking about this.
That's great. This is a good idea. I never thought about it because I could like now that we're doing this, I'm probably going to call somebody and be like, so you want to talk about a trip?
Yeah, I think it's really important. For sure. And I just kind of wanted to start a platform like that's the whole thing with Surrender Living. I think we were talking about it earlier. It's just there's so many things still to celebrate about life, and I just want to find the best people possible to do that with, and walking through this time of life with other people is the way to get through it, I'd say. So yeah, thanks for coming again
That's
to your
good.
living room. It's easy too, right? All you got to do is turn on your computer.
Yeah, it's good. I'm not super bummed right now. You can't go anywhere. Like it's a little disappointing, but I would be more disappointed if it was just me who couldn't go anywhere. If it was like they're like, oh, just so you know, like this year the world decided you can't go anywhere, and I'd be like, nah,
Right.
like everyone's sort of in the same boat. So I'm like, wow, it's just shitty.
Well,
Lots of people. So
yeah,
it
for sure. Just don't commit any crime and then you can go wherever you want.
would be okay. So if the world was opening up in a month and you could go somewhere, where would you go to?
Oh, that's a good question. And yeah, thinking I'd have the right amount of funds to do it. I've always actually wanted to go to see Greece and the
Okay.
Mediterranean. And
Okay.
yeah. I was a real dork in junior high school. I really loved Greek mythology. So to
Yeah.
walk in those steps would be really, really good.
Yeah, it's like so I don't know, like so ancient. The whole country is like mythologically the start of the world, basically between there and Rome was where it sort of all comes from.
Yeah. So what about you? Where would you go?
Ooh, right now I have a pretty big hankering to go to Africa. I really want to. I want to drive from top to bottom, like really bad, really bad.
Wow.
I will not stop bringing it up. So I talked to the fiance. I'm just like, just so you know, I'm like, we're gonna drive through Africa. That's been my plan for a long time, and now you're sort of obligated to go with me. So hopefully
And
you're
what does
interested.
she think of that plan?
Yeah, I think she likes it. She's not. I don't think she's quite as long term about things as I'm like, let's go for like
Yeah.
a year or two, and she's like, let's go for like 4 months.
Right.
I'm like, okay, let's compromise with just like a year and a half.
You got
So,
bad math skills, man, if
yeah,
you think that's the compromise.
right.
Yeah, no, like I've heard that actually Egypt, there because of so much tourism and so many people wanting to see the pyramids in Giza, all that, that they are going to slow that down. And maybe they don't have to now that the world has slowed down, but that would be a definite place I think I'd like to go as well. And before well, it's not going to shut, but before it slows down to tourism.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
tricky when something's almost too popular. It's a little like I remember going through Cambodia, and you can see the ruins there, like where the Mayan calendar originated and that kind of thing. I was there originally like 15 years ago, probably, and the guys they're sort of building platforms around these ruins, and the guys like, just so you know, if I was you, right now you're allowed to walk up these things, and they're whatever, they're 1800 years old, or what calendar year are we in, 2020, so 2000 years old. And he's like, if I was you, I'd go up them right now because you're not going to be allowed to in a fairly short amount of time.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
walked, it was like a novel, you take pictures and stuff. But now I'm like, well, actually, it's closed now. You probably wouldn't be able to walk up those things anymore, or scurry up them, or
Right.
rub the rocks off the edge of them. So that's just like one of probably a lot of things they're going to be like, no, there's been enough people here. Take your picture, beat it.
Right. Yeah. We're very fortunate to have lived in the time we have.
Yeah, now's a good time because you can go and see things, and it's still sort of novel. And I think probably in, let's say, 15 years or something, there'll be a 360 camera at all these sites, and you can go on, just look at the view, and you're like, oh yeah, I've been to whatever Siem Reap or something, and you just see like the surround sound photo, and you can zoom in and go inside the cave. And I'm like, well, cool. And I guess if that's your option and you didn't know any different, that'd be kind of neat because
Yeah.
you could go see it. But I'm like, but to actually go there and like smell the sights and see the elephant walk by and get a ride in the tuk-tuk and eat the rice noodles. I'm like, it's a different.
Ah, you got me excited now.
That's great.
You know where else I would like to go, Kix, is Petra, the lost city of Petra.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very curious about that. I guess that's the little Indiana Jones lover in me. I grew up on that, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I met a guy in I was in Manaus and in Amazon and in Brazil, and he was from there. He's like, if you come and visit me, he's like, you should bring your motorbike. You can bring motorbikes there. There's people on motorbikes there. I'll take you to Petra. My uncle has this farm or like an orchard or something like that. We grow olives and dates, and you can come and stay with us, and you got to see it. And I'm like, all right, I'm like, just so you know, when I call you in 4 years and I'm driving by your house, I'm like, you promise me.
Yeah, you'll do it.
Yeah,
Totally.
Petra would be crazy. It's such a bizarre part of the planet, like just a small slice of the world, but
yeah,
people sort of etched out a living hidden in the rocky wilderness.
Yeah, in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I'm not super interested in desert. I had like my first childhood memory is of a camel, right? And my brother's camel was behind mine, and it started eating, like the camel had, I don't know, hay or whatever on the back of it, and it started eating off of my camel's hay, and I freaked out. I was the little girl. I thought it was trying to eat me. So yeah,
What?
I
Why
don't
did you have a
think
camel?
I don't think a camel in the desert would really work. So, like my dad had a farm in Pakistan, in northern Pakistan, and so we were there, and they thought it would be great to get the camels out and
Like they were his camels?
yeah, and give the kids a ride.
That's hilarious.
No, no, not good. Yeah, I've showed you my camel bag, right? I have a camel bag. It's kind of like a saddle, but it goes on a camel.
I don't think so.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, I'll show it to you someday.
It's made out of camel, or just like designed to go on a camel?
It's no, it's just designed to go on a camel.
Yeah, yeah.
That would be mean. Hey, haha, this is one of your relatives I'm putting on you. Made up
Picturing like maybe it's
camel
like a
hide.
water sack or something. Like they'd be like a little hump would be quite handy to fill full of water and carry it around. But I'm like, I don't know.
Right, right. And then there's some camels, I think, with one, and then one hump, and then some with two.
Yeah.
I don't remember, but anyway, yeah, that's funny. That's my first childhood memory.
I'd have to go back and maybe fight back against the
Camel.
memories.
Yeah, yeah. So you probably, I would say, you told me earlier, how many countries have you been to
I
now?
think it's 42. I'm not. That could be a little inaccurate, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
That's
'Cause every once in a
incredible.
while, I'll sit down and actually like write them all out. And I'm like, yep, yep, yep. And then I'll be like jogging or something. I'm like, oh yeah, should have been there too. So I'll write that one down.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's yeah, it's not bad. I like some people like that's a lot, but there's also lots of people who've been like there's like this centenarian club of like people who've been to 100 plus countries kind of thing. And I'm like, I want to be part of that club.
Yeah.
But I don't
Oh,
want
you've
to
got
go.
lots of time to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to half-ass it though. Like I don't want someone's like I've been somewhere. I'm like, if you've been somewhere for like an airport stop, I'm like, that she doesn't fly with me. I'm like,
Yeah.
if you've
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
there for
Yeah.
like 2 weeks, okay, you can have it.
Yeah.
I prefer like a month is sort of like as the minimum, which I haven't been all those places for a month, but for the most part, most places I've been for like at least a month generally.
That's nice. That's a good way of doing it because, if you whiz through a country, it's definitely different than stopping in, and yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of places like I just wasn't able to. I went through Paraguay and I didn't have the right visa. And so they just gave me like a transit visa for 48 hours or something like that. So I'm like, oh, this doesn't really qualify as a place I know much about because I just saw the roads really. I'm like, this looks really nice. And I met a couple people that were friendly, but I'm like, I don't know anything. I just like ripped through the whole country so I wouldn't get my bike impounded. So it doesn't really count on the long list of things, but I'm like, I've kind of been there. I saw three,
So
4 days.
Kix, you're an amazing storyteller. Like, what are you going to do with your stories? You got to do something. And that's another thing about Surrender Living is that I am interested so much in storytelling. My own stories and other people's stories, like they connect human beings so well, and you're so good at it. So tell me, what are you going to do?
I'm a little behind, but I'm about 7/10 through a book that I'm writing.
Nice.
So I started this book like I guess maybe when I got back, like I've been home from that bike trip. I don't even know, maybe it's been 2 years or a year and a half or something. I'm not exactly sure, but it's been a little while. And I'm like, I'm going to write a book about this trip because I blogged quite a bit. And then even after I was done, like the blogging part of it, I just sort of like, boom, put out the blogs. I didn't really like articulate them over the top or like spell check or.
Yeah.
I'm just like, this is what I'm up to. And then go. So I go back and read them. And I'm like, these are actually like not bad stories. And then there's quite a few things that I actually didn't write about at all, which is weird because there's some pretty incredible stuff that happened that I'm like, I never put a Facebook post about this. I never wrote a story about this. I never had a picture about this. I'm like, I wonder why. Like, I just wonder why I never, like, this is like a highlight of my trip and I never told anyone about it. And so I'm like, this shit's going in a book. And so I started writing it. I thought it would take me about 4 months to write a book. I was ridiculously underestimated how difficult it is to write a book. I had no idea. I
Tell me about it.
I had no idea it was that hard. I just thought you just sit down and like it flows out of you and that's it. But I'll sit down and I'll write like a chapter and I'll be exhausted afterwards.
Yeah.
It's shocking. Like because you're kind of like puking a piece of you onto a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Or onto a laptop or whatever. And then like emotionally reliving the moment.
Yeah.
And kind of going through it and it's sort of like, I love it. Like I love it, especially right now. It's good because
And do you write the way that you speak,
I
Kix?
think so. I'll have to get
Yeah.
some opinion, but I feel like the way I say it is kind of the way I talk to.
Yeah.
So when people read it, they either love it or they're just not going to love it. Like some people will be like, "Oh my god, I just love the way that you write your stories," and people are like, "This doesn't fucking make any sense." I'm like, well, that's the way it happened, and that's the way I remember seeing it. So that's the way it comes out.
Yeah. And so then when you were a kid and before you started traveling and things, like how did you get this love of the world? Like where did it come from?
I don't really
Did you
know. 'Cause
read about stuff in storybooks and you were like, cool, I want to go there, or what?
I don't really, like, I'm not sure. Like when I was a little kid, my parents, we didn't leave the country ever. Never like went.
Yeah,
lived
like
in
you're a farm
Canada.
boy.
Yeah, I lived in like a little small town. We didn't go anywhere. I think one time we drove up to see my uncle in BC and we went through Spokane and I'd never seen like a cherry cola before. I never used an American quarter. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. We bought a Nintendo with American dollars and I was like, whoa, look how cheap it is. Well, I was like, no, there's exchange rates. So that was like my first memory of ever going anywhere. And
Right.
then, but I don't remember ever having any influence from anyone about like places you could go or things you could see ever. I don't remember. I maybe watched National Geographic and like it. But when I remember being in high school and always thinking, like, I'm pretty happy I grew up in a small town, but I always thought I'm like, there must be like so much more to the world than this. There just has to be. There just like, there was like there was like zero culture. I'm from a place of no culture at all.
No, that's not true. The cowboy culture is a thing. It's a big thing, actually.
I'm from a place with one culture, let's say, like it's
Yeah,
limited
monoculture,
diversity.
sure.
Maybe that's the word, limited diversity.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you were to come here, it's pretty interesting, but there's like it's a town of like farmer white people. So like everyone's really nice and friendly and polite, but I couldn't imagine like getting off of the plane from Pakistan and going to the town I grew up in and being like, this is it for me. I'm like, you'd probably be like, what in the fuck is it?
Well, I was pretty little. I was 3, right? But I'm sure my parents were scratching their heads, freezing their asses off.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Great place to grow up and loved everything. But as soon as I finished high school, I'm like, I'm out of here. Like, I'm just like, I don't know I have no idea what else is out there. I don't have any idea. I just like.
So then where was your first trip then? Like your big one? Like.
I mean, a friend left when we were 18. I didn't tell anyone, me and a buddy of mine. We just worked and saved enough money to buy plane tickets with. And I didn't tell my parents and tell anybody at all until I think it was maybe a month before we were going to leave for like a year. I told my parents, I'm like, just so you know, I bought these plane tickets to Australia and like Borneo and Malaysia. We landed in Malaysia. I'll be in Japan for like 10 days. And I'm like, I'm going to leave in a month. And my parents like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm like, no, I already bought the ticket. Like I saved the money for it. I did it all myself. I got my passport or whatever. And they're like, God damn it. And so that was it. And then we had a party and then we left and it was amazing. It was just like, we landed in Japan and I'd never been, like we landed in Tokyo. It was my first, like I'd been to Mexico once for a wedding, but that was like my first ever sort of other cultural experience, I guess. And I'm like, what the hell is Tokyo? Like, you feel like you're in the future. And, like, and then we went right to Malaysia after that. And we're in Kuala Lumpur and I'm like, oh my God, people are like dying streets and starving, and there's also like a lot of wealth, and people are. It was just like such a shocker from the safe little place I grew up at, which was really good. Although I did meet so that's not all. There's a little bit more to the story too. I did meet a guy when I was in grade 9, and he was in grade 12, or just graduated. Sorry, and he came and talked to our class. He grew up in the same town I grew up in, and he had gone. I think Andy Davies, I think is his name. And he had gone, and I think he'd been in Peru after high school for like 6 months. And he talked about like sleeping in the jungle and living in a hammock and these tree houses and seeing all this stuff. And I remember he talked to our class and I'm like, what the hell? And he was kind of an inspiration about like this crazy world. You're from the same town I'm from. You're from the same school I'm from.
Nice.
Like went out and you had this sort of weird experience in life. And I met him like probably 8 years ago or something, just set up like a house party. And I'm like, you're Andy Davies. Like he's like a celebrity. And he's like, yes, I am Andy Davies. And I'm like, you came and talked to our class when I was in grade 9. And I'm like, in Peru. And he's like, oh yeah, it was cool. I'm like, no. I'm like, after that trip, I'm like, I gotta go see these places. So yeah, I forgot about it. Yeah, so he was maybe my one little experience. But after that, once you go, you're hooked. I don't know. I think it's like heroin. I'm sure like you just have a little taste. Just have one little taste.
Yeah. First one's free. No, I wish my first trip was free. Man. Yeah, very cool though, Kix. I hope that you do finish that book and get it out into the world, because you do have a gift of the storytelling and a gift of the gab. So we're definitely going to do this again. and arm you with some pictures next time. I think that'll be really,
Perfect. Yeah, I got a few good pictures. Yeah.
yeah, a few. Yep, for sure. Okay, so I'm gonna turn off the recording, but hang tight because I want to chat with you some more. Thank you so much for coming by today.
Thanks
Coming
for
by,
having me.
like you're in my house. You know what I'm trying to say. Thank you.